morning, everybody. Good morning. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Tim, welcome back. You want to lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. So I don't forget, I'm going to slide this time. Do you have any visitors here this morning? Around the room, go ahead. Yeah. Please do.
I'll be introducing our speaker today, Mary Gelinas, and she'll be doing the presentation. So we'll go ahead.
We have my husband Jim Schaefer here today.
Sophie Saucedo, President of North Bay Rotaract.
All right. Let's see, Sojourning Sunrisers. I will start with this one. I was at Trinity Lake last weekend. It was beautiful. I spent a lot of time with the family. However, we usually go boating when we're there, so we took the first boat out, and the outboard broke on that. So we towed it back to the dock, and then we used my uncle's boat. About halfway up the lake, the water pump went out on that one. So needless was to say, it was a lot of towing and broken boats, but hey, we had fun, and it was a good time. So, Tim, you've been doing some traveling lately. You want to tell us a little about your journey?
I've been gone almost all summer. I was in Europe at the beginning. I went to Ukraine for a few days, and then to Switzerland to visit my parents who lived there. Got back to the U.S., spent a few weeks in Humboldt County, and then my best friend, he had already planned a trip to Europe, over to Switzerland, and I promised him, yeah, you can stay with my grandparents, it's going to be free, it's going to be great. And I kind of forgot about that until a few weeks before it happened, so I had to go back to Switzerland for 7 days. But it was good, we got to do all the touristy things that I never got to do because I used to be a resident there. Then we came back, and a few days later, my friend's parents, they had moved to Georgia earlier in the year. They used to live up in Trinidad. I helped them drive out with the U-Haul all the way out to Rome, Georgia, and they had their housewarming party. So I thought it was a good opportunity to take a road trip, leisurely road trip from Arcata out to Georgia, and went through LA and took the Interstate 10, it's the most southern interstate,
Sure, yeah,
through Tucson, stayed there a few nights, then San Antonio, New Orleans, which was really an amazing city, kind of blew me away, and then up to Rome, spent a few days there, and got tired of the traveling, so put the car on a trailer and flew back to Arcata, and I'll wait for the car to get back. But yeah, got back last week.
Wow. Cool. That's quite the journey. Yeah, well, welcome back.
Thanks.
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
Good to be back.
Travelers this week.
Yeah, not quite that exciting, but we did.
Yeah, that's a good job to follow that.
It is, but we did go to Europe. My youngest son met us in the airport in San Francisco, and we took off and we landed in Munich. We stayed there for a couple of days, and then we flew over to Pisa, Italy, and we saw that. And then we joined. Well, actually, right there we joined one of our exchange student families. Audrey Bellier, who was an exchange student here from France in 1995-96, and her family. So we then went over to Via Reggio, and we stayed there for about 5 or 6 days. Had a wonderful time with them. We trained up to Milan, and it was about 106 degrees there. And I don't know if you know, those European cities are all made of rock. So everything is made of stone, and it gets quite warm. After that, we flew up to Copenhagen to visit the other exchange student that we had that year, 95-96, and that was Maria Vilidsen, who we had not seen since she left here. The turbulent warning sheet, we put her on the plane, and she was kind of a wild thing when she was here. And when we got there, she picked us up and she had us over for dinner, and her parents were there, and she cooked everything. And she has a craft room in her house, and she's got it all going on. She had bought her childhood home from her folks and moved in there with their 2 girls and her husband, Mikkel. And about the time I was starting to worry about her being completely and totally domesticated, she said, well, right after this I leave with my girlfriends for like a 4-day music festival out in the country. So, and then we got a text with some pictures, and you know, she's still a wild thing. So.
You were relieved.
Yes. Yes. She picked us up at the airport, and we went over to an apartment that we had rented, and I went over to get a 6-pack of beer because Casper, who was our Danish exchange student in 2009, was coming over to meet us, and as I'm walking through the grocery store, boom, there he is. He's about this tall, and I mean, if you know Casper, you would recognize him immediately. So that was a lot of fun. We got together. He has a girlfriend there. He lives outside the city somewhere. Copenhagen's a great, great town. Weather's more like this, so, you know, it was a great way to end the trip. So anyway, we had a great time, touch bases with all those exchange students. And so, you know, when you invite somebody over, we will. We will show up even after 21 years.
Feel bit older, right? Any other travelers here this week?
This is summer for European travel. We just got back from a 7-day cruise company conference, and then took some time, went up to Paris for a few days, and then visited friends down in the rural countryside of England, which was just amazingly beautiful during their garden tours. So really great summer. It is a summer for going to Europe.
After I did my craft talk 2 weeks ago, I went to Santa Rosa and took my test, and I passed my law and ethics exam. And then we went to Ukiah, and we went to a Tom Petty concert, or a Tom Petty cover band concert. Tom Petty band. Not the same thing. And then when I got back into town, we drove north to Spokane, Washington, and then checked out Multnomah Falls. And then there's like a waterfall that goes through the city, and you know, sightseeing all the way home. It was fun.
That sounds crazy. Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
Marty and I were down at our cabin on the Russian River for 5 days, and my mother was there for 3 days, which is a whole, I'll give a program sometime. But the important thing is yesterday we saw the polio riders heading south. And the road in place, there's a lot of construction, and there was no shoulder in some places. And we saw a couple, I think they had, I don't know if they had 2 sag wagons or one, but we saw, you know, lots of signage and lots of out-of-breath Rotarians riding in the hills. But it was cool to see them.
Yeah, that's great. So, if there's no other travelers, we'll move on to anniversaries. I don't see Praj or Siva here today. Going last week back to birthday, to Tomas. You had a birthday. And he gets to travel too.
Last Friday, while he's sitting next to me, it's his birthday.
Last Friday was my birthday. Yeah, we brought my family to Rotary, and then you guys went to Italy and to Switzerland and to Washington. Well, I went to Vallejo. Tried some really, really authentic, interesting food. Mexican place, I've heard of it, Chipotle. Went to, had some really good seafood at this really, I'm told, really authentic place, the Red Lobster. So, we took a family trip down to Vallejo to take my son and my other son, who's 7 months old, to Six Flags. And last time we went there, we believe is when this young man was conceived into this world. So I told my wife, let's take it back to where it all started. Not at the park, sorry. So we went down to Six Flags, had a great day down there on Saturday. Went Friday, did the hotel thing, so I'm at the pool, didn't worry about anything, went out to eat. We were originally going to go camping for my birthday. My wife said, this is too much work, you're always packing and unpacking and this, and we had gone like 5 times this year. So I said, let's just go sit at a hotel and do something fun. So yeah, we had a great weekend. Came back Sunday, Nice drive each way, no problems. We actually got right through on the 101 both times. We pulled up and the cars are going. I was like counting my birthday blessings on that one. Yeah, good times.
Great, great.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Thomas. Happy birthday to you.
All right. So, speaking of Pedal for Polio, we got to meet with them on their first leg of the tour on Monday night up at Trinidad. Lori, do you want to say anything about that?
We get to do the potluck, and for all of you that were there or brought something, stand up. Woo! You guys are amazing. It was fun. It was their longest leg, 75 miles, I think.
Yeah.
They had to go up those hills, up through Last Chance Grade, but they all looked fantastic. And remember, Bob Rogers, our district governor, is 75 and he's doing this, so it's pretty incredible. I do want to share something that happened though that night. Bill Sauber, who's down in, I think, the Sebastopol Club, was actually in tears talking about one of their newest members to their club, who used to be an exchange student for this club, Nikki Larson. And when he mentioned Nikki's name, Dustin got all red and said, "Oh my gosh, that was the first girl I ever kissed."
Must be a big hug from her.
Who was the second one? Small world in Rotary. So it was fun. Thanks for everybody who came.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in honor of the riders, we bought some T-shirts, so I'm just going to play a little quiz game with you, and if you get it right, you get a T-shirt. It's a fun T-shirt, so...
Megan Larson.
That's a T-shirt worthy.
All right. Okay. So this is maybe an easy one. Year to date, this is Price is Right rules, so you'll go, the closest one to it underneath the number wins. And we'll say the first one to yell it out, because we'll probably have some people crossing over. So year to date, 2017, how many cases of polio worldwide do we have?
9, 2.
But Terry's gonna get like 5
This is
G's.
going to be very fair, Terry.
How many shirts, Terry, do you need?
So in contrast to that, back in 1988, how many estimated cases were there worldwide?
200,000.
200,000. Any other guesses? Shout it out. 90,000. Shout it out. Do one more guess, somebody.
150,000.
350,000 is what it was estimated at. So that was
That's
pretty remarkable. All right, so then 3 countries actually never stopped the transmission of the wild polio virus. Can anyone name those 3 countries? If you can't, give me 2.
Pakistan.
See, well done. Afghanistan, that's correct. Good job, Steve, you got that.
Give it easy needs. We need a polio shirt.
That's right.
Yeah, because she's easy to lose.
So how long, once you contract the virus, or how short, I should say, does it take for the virus to actually kick in and potentially paralyze you?
24 hours.
24 hours? Any other guesses?
6 months.
6 months? It can actually happen within a couple of hours. You can completely paralyzed.
That's crazy.
Which is absolutely frightening. Karen, you get that one. And then, what age group does the virus affect most? Is most susceptible to the virus?
Young children.
Absolutely. It's kids 5 and under are most susceptible to it. So pretty startling facts there, and it just kind of shows the good work that we do when we raise money for this. I sent out an email this morning. Bob's goal was to raise $80,000. That's every Rotarian in the district giving $35. There's a link there where you can donate if you'd like. They're at $50,000 right now, so they're making their way up there. So if you'd like to, go ahead and do that. There's instructions in the email, but it's a great cause, and Bob's doing a great thing. And, you know, he's a polio survivor. He's 75 himself, and he's making the trek. So anything we can do to support him would be great. So that is that. Other upcoming events, we have the annual Cavalier Run on the 27th. We have the Out of the Darkness walks. If you haven't joined the team for that, please do. Yeah, it'll be a good one down here on the plaza. And then a little bit later on, we have the walk to end Alzheimer's as well. We're going to start a team for that. And then we have the Casa Kids walk. Ray, did you want to say anything about that? We had some pretty good interest last week.
Yeah, there was enough people to start a team instead of contributing North Bay Rotaract team, so that was pretty awesome. So I'll send an email around with ways to contribute to the team, and if anyone else wants to join, I'll send an initial email to the whole club, and then I will, if anyone else wants to join, I'll send emails just to that small group of the team.
Right. Izzy, you want to come up and talk a little bit about your week? You gave me some photos so you can kind of scroll through here, and I put them on the screen for you.
Yeah, I came here on Thursday morning, 1 a.m.
1:30.
1:30.
Who's counting?
Yeah, and on Friday we were leaving backpacking in the Trinity Alps for 3 days till Sunday. It was amazing. Yeah, there's some.
Oh, wow.
And that's the last
I want to go there.
She's playing that waterfall on the left, and hopefully her mother doesn't see that. Washed off the mountain.
Yeah, and this week, yeah, I'm in the tennis team at Arcata High.
Yay!
Great.
And yeah, I had a wonderful week.
All right.
I remember there were naked women in the pool the week I took my teenage boys. Wasn't sure if they liked it or not, yeah.
No, they like it.
Just not with their mom there.
Never forget it.
It was memorable.
So it is August, and August is a membership and new club development month. And so with that, I thought it'd be appropriate that North Bay Rotaract president give a short talk about their year and their goals and whatnot, since we did help them out a lot. They were a new club a little while ago, and they rechartered, and we get a lot of members from that club, and hope to have more. So with that, Sophie, you want to come up and talk about the club?
Hi guys, I'm Sophie. Can someone read this mission statement aloud for me? How about Rachel?
Oh,
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
The purpose of Rotaract is to provide an opportunity for young men and women to enhance the knowledge and skills that will assist them in personal development, to address the physical and social needs of their communities, and to promote better relations between all people worldwide through a framework of friendship and service.
Thank you. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a strategic planning meeting, and my club discussed what we want to focus on this year. And these are the three things that came up. We definitely want to focus more on professional development. We've been talking to Steve about maybe doing a mentorship program, and we match up the members that haven't quite gotten established in their jobs yet with a Rotarian who can kind of give them some guidance. So Steve's going to be contacting you about that. And then also, we want to get more business owners coming to speak to our club, just to kind of get more involved. And we'll be attending one of the city chamber mixers. And we attended one of those, the August Arcata one, and we made a lot of good connections. So yeah, that's that. We also want to focus on membership. So one thing we'll definitely be pushing for is HSE students. Believe it or not, we don't have any HSE students in the club at the moment. So we have a few tabling events coming up, and we've cut the dues in half for HSE students to kind of give them an incentive to join. We'll also, let's see, public relations. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter if you want to follow us. We'll try to keep updated on that. We do most of our communication via Facebook. And then we'll also be making new swag items like t-shirts and lanyards, and we just made magnets. So I'm excited about that. Just things to hand out so people kind of know who we are, like put our logo on something so people know they can call us when they need help. I'm going to talk about a few projects we have coming up this year. I don't think I've told you guys yet. This past week, we actually just completed one. We sponsored a student with Project Amigo, and we just got the name of that student last night. She's named Olga, and she's in Colima, Mexico, so we'll be getting a bio soon. She's a junior high student, and the sponsorship pays for the student fees, uniforms, gym clothes, basically supplies, anything that that student's going to need. So that's definitely valuable for Olga. We have the final coming up on September 10th. I know we have a date conflict, but we want to get Arcata High School Interact involved. They usually volunteer with that. We'll be benefiting for local nonprofits, Companion Animal Foundation, CASA, Boys and Girls Club, and Food for the People. You can find that on, we have a Facebook page for that also if you want to sign up. And then, that's going to be in Blue Lake at 10 a.m. And as you might know, we do the Humboldt Wine Fest with the Rotary Club of Arcata Noon. That's the biggest fundraiser of the year. Last year we raised $23,000 with them, and we split that halfway, so we have a lot of funds to do things with this year. It's kind of exciting. It's the most we've had. So you'll be getting some updates on that as we get closer to that. That's going to be in March. Ennis Park, there's a playground on Wyatt. It's
Wyatt and Stewart.
Wyatt and Stewart.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to install a new playground at that park. We've been in contact with the city, and so far it's not looking too good, but we'll keep pushing because that community definitely needs a new playground. And then the thing we have going on now is the Jamrock School Supply Drive. We'll be collecting school supplies for students in Jamaica. We have a couple members taking a vacation to Jamaica in December, and they've agreed to take a few bags full of school supplies because a lot of the students just don't have the resources they need to be successful in school. So I'm in contact with the club in Jamaica, and that's going to be happening soon. So we'll be coming around soon and collecting school supplies. I'll let you know what day I'll be here. I guess that's it. I just also wanted to say thank you to Nick, Steve, Stan, and Dustin. They've all been a huge support to us. They've offered a lot of mentorship, and I kind of like getting the club going this year, so I appreciate them a lot. So, thank you.
All right, Carol, Joe, Scott.
Where's Hughes Park and what's the problem you're having with the city?
Oh, that is on Wyatt and Stewart, and basically it's just not a big priority for them at the moment. So they want us to do something else that they've been doing, I think like Glenview Park. So, I don't know, we'll see what they say.
Okay.
Do you have, can you help us? Okay.
All right, Carol, yeah.
All right. Well, I am thrilled to introduce our guest speaker today, who's Mary Gelinas. And Mary's been working as an educator, consultant, facilitator, and designer of, processes that help communities get things done for over 40 years. I first met Mary as through the Cascadia Leadership Institute, and probably several of you have been through that as well, which is a pretty transformative experience back in 2010. And since then, I've had the opportunity to learn from her and her husband, Roger, who run the, Roger James, who run the Institute, as well as the Leadership for Organizational and Community Change. And so through that, she shared a lot of her ideas out of her book, Talk Matters, and I like the subtitle, what is it, Changing the World one word at a time. Or
Saving the world.
Saving the world, one word at a time. And I think that it's more important than ever, and in the work that we do, and I love how her emphasis is on how we can all, whether we're in an official leadership position, as we're at meetings, as we're in conversations, we can all make a real difference. And so I'd like to bring up Mary. Hey.
Thank you, Carol. So I am just thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with you this morning about something that seems more important every day. Given the events in Charlottesville last weekend, our inability to talk with one another and to resolve our differences and to talk through different points of view, and most importantly, to talk with people who differ from us. It becomes more and more important every day. I mean, literally, if we're going to save our world. I mean, that's how I see it. It's that important. So let me grab the... And let's look at the, is this slide, are these slides gonna, let's see, which, I assume it's this one, is this? No? Uh-oh. What just happened?
You broke it. Where's it?
I broke it. Oh, Dustin broke it. Oh, good. Let's play this. It's, let's see. What's that? And let's cut it off on the side. That'll continue. So while we're fixing that in an act of shameless book promotion, this is what the book looks like, and I'd love for you to buy it at one of our local bookstores instead of from Amazon.
Is it at Blake's Books?
It's at Blake's, Northtown, and Booklegger. So please support our local independent bookstores. I'd really be grateful.
I was going to say too, this weekend I went and saw the musical Hair for the first time. My cousin was in it, and it was so cool just because I wasn't there back during that time. I wasn't born, but we always kind of tease about the hippie era. But that whole movement, like, I'm going to cry just talking about it, but just them all getting together and all that love. It's like my kids aren't going to be in the draft, and there's just so many cool things that happened out of that. And I think about what we could do, in our generation, if we can communicate and get together like that. It was so cool. Anyways, sorry, I was going to take anything, but it's such a neat thing.
I saw Hair in London when I was in college.
There were people I'd been there that were watching it.
That dates me, right? So now you know how old I am.
It was so cool. It was like racial stuff and everything.
I'm not sure how to make this full screen, but it works now.
Oh, it does, okay. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. There. Okay. So you were talking about thank you very much. So you were talking about your trips this summer. I'm just going to tell you briefly about mine. It was in May. Is that okay? It's So, and the reason I want to tell you is because I was there consulting with one of my clients, which is the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. So I was in the startup with they call it in Europe the Secretariat. So it's the organization that supports 7,500 mayors around the world who are all focused on doing something about climate change and working on sustainable energy. So it's funded by Michael Bloomberg and the European Commission. So the group was from various nationalities, countries, ethnic backgrounds, and languages. So if that group, supporting a larger group of 7,500 mayors across the world who are also talking with one another, so I'm sharing that both as a sign of hope for the future around climate change, and the fact that people from such different backgrounds can talk with one another to do something good for the world. So at the end of I'm starting my timer here. So at the end of my time, and so the 20 minutes includes, and because I'm a little behind, I'll go faster. Time for questions. I'd like you to know what I think of as good conversation, and why I think it's so essential. What scares you in conversations, because it's relevant to how we interact with one another, and we get scared in ways that might surprise you. That how threats derail our conversations and literally change what's going on in our brains. And then finally, at least one key to create good conversations. So, ready to go? Yeah. Good. Okay. So, here's my first premise. And you have handouts at your table, so the slide is a little cut off. So this is Martin Luther King. Which is better? Where is it better for me to stand? Over here? Probably. So my first premise comes from Martin Luther King, and this is from his letter from the Birmingham jail in April 1965. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So I want to suggest that that's not only our actions and all the wonderful actions that this club does in our community, which I'm so grateful for and I admire so greatly. It's our words, and we can witness this every day on our televisions and our radios, how words affect other human beings. So, second premise is how we talk matters because we have big issues facing us. And when I say big issues, I want you to think both locally, nationally, and internationally around the world. And we could brainstorm a list. I mean, everything from homelessness, food insecurity, transportation issues, racism, sexism. I mean, you know, the list is long. And they're complex because they're often interrelated. If you think about the issues of homelessness, for example, how many other issues does that connect with? Just shout them out. Addiction. Poverty. Depression. What?
Domestic abuse.
Domestic abuse. I mean, just that. I mean, just within what was that? That was like 2 seconds. You could name the other issues. So not only are they big, but they're complicated because they're connected with other issues. And I think for many of us, we appear to be creating a future that very few of us or none of us want. And finally, my belief is we can create conversations. We can create a desired future together by how we interact, how we solve problems, how we define problems, how we think about all the systems of how complex issues are and try to understand those. So this is why I actually wrote the book, because what I was seeing, I mean, I've been doing this work, I've been basically facilitating conversations since I was in college. So what I began to see over the last 20 years was a couple of things were happening at the same time. One is the polarities in this country and in our communities was increasing, number one. Number two is brain science was exploding with knowledge because of increases in technology. We began to understand more about the brain and its impact on our behavior. And number three, there was a lot of innovation in processes, how people make decisions, how they develop public policy. But that information about brain science and innovative processes was not migrating into how people talk with one another in organizations, in our communities, in our government agencies. So what my attempt in the book is actually to integrate that knowledge so that it's more available to people to use, both as leaders and as participants in processes. So how do I define good conversation? Good conversation occurs when people listen with genuine curiosity and honestly consider others' points of view. That may be the hardest part of any conversation, especially when we're talking with people who have views that set our hair on fire, right? I mean, I'm going home in a week. I'm going to be with my family in Massachusetts. I have a brother whose views set my hair on fire. It's really hard for me to listen to him. I often don't. But I do my very best to understand that point of view, because I mean, how can I, if I don't practice what I preach, how can I expect others to do that? Expressing appreciation for others' point of view. It doesn't mean we agree with them, but it means we appreciate maybe how they came to that point of view. That we share our points of view as just that, like we hold our views and our ideologies lightly. When I mean lightly, it's like our identities get caught up with our points of view. You know, I'm a tree hugger, I'm a business developer, it's like we grasp these opinions as if they were us. And so then when people disagree with us, we feel like we're being threatened. So it's like, how can we hold them lightly so we can actually listen to how other people see things? Again, not so we disagree, but so we understand. Include those who differ from us and who are or will be affected by decisions. And then finally, good conversation occurs when people feel safe enough to share what is most deeply important to them. So why don't people feel safe, and why is that important? So threats to our sense of safety affect how we perceive, how we think, and how we interact. So I'm going to ask you, and this is just literally a 2-minute request. I'd like you to think, even as I'm saying this, how do you get scared? And scared is a kid word. I mean, when we grow up and become adults, we say, oh, well, I feel challenged, or I feel threatened. But, let's use a kid word. I get scared. I get scared when? So I'd like you to turn to somebody near you, and this is like 1 minute each, and just say complete that sentence. I get scared when. So I'll give you mine. I get scared when people interrupt me. I get scared when people don't make eye contact with me. I get scared when I feel dismissed, or my opinion is dismissed. You get what I'm saying? So 1 minute each. So just turn to someone near you, someone who want to start, and just do 1 minute.
Normally I would just, okay.
Switch to the second person. Second person. Switch to the second person. Well, that was Conversations. So, let's hear a few, please. I get scared when? How do you get scared in conversations and interactions? Anybody?
Well, I was saying I get scared in conversations or challenged when I feel a certain way, and I may or may not have the facts to support my feeling or my argument.
Right. Good. Thank you. Everybody, you can all hear one another, right? You're in small enough space. Yeah. What are some other examples? Thank you very much. Please.
When I don't know how to communicate the message.
Okay. It's like you know what you want to say, but you don't know how to communicate it. Great. Please.
When I'm getting ready to have a conversation with somebody and I already know that they have a hard opinion on whatever it is we're discussing, and I don't know how to respond, especially if I don't agree and I know that my opinion won't be respected regardless. I'm always like trying to get out of it, back away somehow.
Right, yeah, so there's two elements there you're saying. One is you know the person has a sort of a hard position, and also that when you share your position, it's not going to be respected or considered. Yeah, so that's a double win. Yeah. Right, it's a twofer. Yeah. What else? Let's do one more. Howard.
I get scared when the person is talking loudly, angrily, and then add to that personally insulting.
Right. Oh, okay. So the loudness, the anger,
the confidence too can be part of it.
Yeah.
But then the quadruple whammy is when they start actually insulting, the person.
Yeah, Howard, how could you possibly believe that? You're a mathematics professor, right? How could you possibly know that? Or you're a musician. How could you possibly think that?
Well,
yeah.
Still you get scared.
Yeah, exactly. So, this is interesting. So when we're having a conversation, there's no lions, tigers, or bears in the conversation, right? So what are we afraid of? It's interesting. There is a negativity bias in the brain where we are physiologically very sensitive to any sort of threat. And what happens when we feel threatened is a couple of things. Physiologically, the energy in our bodies, in our brains, goes to the midbrain and the brainstem. So we become reactive. We literally become in a fight, flight, or flee mode, or freeze, excuse me, fight, flee, or freeze mode. So we lose connection, and we go to the next slide. So I want you to understand that this is not just an emotion, it's also physiological. There's a physiological change that goes in our body. On in our body. So our awareness and our access to the prefrontal cortex, which is right here, which is the source of what many people call the executive function. And in the executive function of rational thinking, connecting ideas, making value judgments, one of the key aspects of our prefrontal cortex is to inhibit impulsive action. So when we lose access to that, we are out of conscious control of our behavior. So we often say, or we become mindless, we kind of go on automatic. So a part of us begins to say and do things out of our conscious control. Are you aware of when that happens to yourself? You either get afraid, or often the kissing cousin of fear is anger. So we often do or say things, and I know when I can see words coming out of my mouth, it's like, I can't believe I'm saying this, stop, but I don't. Or it's going on quietly inside. I mean, we're all good as act as if, right? We're cool, we're adults, we can handle this, right? But inside, we're spinning stories, and we're frightened, and we're angry. So part of what happens is that we tend to engage in biased listening and reasoning. You've probably heard the term confirmation bias. So we begin to look for information that confirms what we already believe. And unfortunately, we have news stations now that actually feed that confirmation bias. So emotional contagion can affect a group. So are you aware of sometimes when someone else is angry, but you're not, and all of a sudden your heart will start to race? We have a system in a part of our nervous system resonates with other people. And that happens on an unconscious physiological level. We're not necessarily choosing to be angry. Our bodies are picking it up and mirroring it. And finally, this is an important one. Emotional reactions occur before our conscious awareness. So we are often upset or frightened or angry before we're even aware it's going on, and we're already in saying something. So fourth premise. So good conversation is not just about managing our own fear and our own behavior. It's also about our interpersonal skills and how we design and facilitate conversations, regardless of whether leading them or participating in them. So I focused on the self-knowledge and mastery part of it on 3 levels, because I think that's the one that's often overlooked. It's how do we manage ourselves? Okay, so last piece is, so this has really gone into the mainstream. So you've probably seen it recently, just last month, on the cover of Newsweek, on the cover of Time magazine, mindfulness practice. It's really become more popular than I ever would have imagined when I began meditating 30 years ago. So what's important to me about mindfulness? Number one, its impact on the human brain. We have research now, and if you want to know sources, I'm happy to give you offline. We have research now that tells us that mindfulness practice does a couple of things. Number one, it makes us less likely to be reactive to situations, and it strengthens the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the midbrain and the brainstem. So we have the ability to make more conscious choices about whether to listen, how to ask a good question, how to respond versus react in a difficult situation when people are saying or doing things that are really hard for you to handle. Yeah, so I think there's probably enough about that. So let me just highlight a couple of things here. Mindfulness, this is Daniel Siegel, School of Medicine, UCLA. Mindfulness is our ability to pause before we react. It gives us the space of mind in which we can consider various options and then choose the most appropriate. To me, that's the key. Can I be aware enough to pause so I can make a conscious choice as opposed to being reactive? So that not only a conscious choice, but I can remember the humanity of the other people with whom I am speaking. That to me is the key. Because when we get reactive, I know I do, I can turn the other person into an object that I'm trying to convince or insult or whatever it is. All of a sudden, I lose touch with the humanity of the other people who are saying things that are very difficult for me to hear. So Viktor Frankl, many of you may know, psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So, I'm closing with this. So premise 5, we can create conversations that can save the world. And ask yourself, in a difficult conversation, what could I say or do right now to help create safety and constructively move this conversation forward? Just asking the question will open up new possibilities. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'm sorry I went a little over. We don't have time for questions. Is that
Any questions? Yeah, we're right there.
Questions, please.
When you're talking about conversation, you're talking about face-to-face. How do you think that people are conversing using social media now? Because a lot of conversations are happening not in person.
And so the question about that is?
So do these same things work when you're
Yes.
conversing in social media?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think it's harder because we're not feeling that human connection. They're only words on a page, and we can make up what those words mean. We can make up the tone of voice. So I think it's possible, but it's harder. I'll put it that way.
And knowing these things would help even more.
I
if
think
you're
so.
conversing on social media.
Yes.
And add that humanity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and think about the impact of the words. You know, on your Twitters and in your, Facebook pages, etc. Yeah. Please, Howard.
You talked about the process, but don't have time to say much about it.
No.
But, just any quick suggestions? Suppose the other person goes on a rant, and you're not wanting to listen for 2 hours.
Yeah.
to get into it. Just any quick tips about how to, without alienating the other person.
Right.
Manage it. Basically, how to manage the conversation.
Right. So here's my go-to. Here's my go-to. Number one, when somebody's ranting and they're saying stuff that's setting my hair on fire, I've practiced this for a long time, so I do it sort of automatically. But you can learn it. I feel my feet. I feel my butt in the chair. I feel my breath in my body. So that slows down my physiology. And then if somebody just like going on and on, I'll interrupt and say, I want to make sure I understand what it is you're saying to me right now. And then I paraphrase back to them what it is I'm hearing they're saying. I'll say, okay, so you think this and this and that, and the reason you think this is this, right? If I got that, usually that slows them down. It slows me down. When I paraphrase, it helps me slow down. It usually slows them down. Because oftentimes they're saying things they don't even know that they're saying, or they don't realize they're starting to repeat themselves over and over again. And they'll say, oh, yeah, you got it. And then they might want to go on, but oftentimes they go deeper. You know what I mean? It's like their position is here. It's like, blah, 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 I think this about that. But then when you paraphrase them, or then you could say, another good question is, how did you come to see this situation this way? So you're asking them to go deeper. So those are my tips.
So what the hell is wrong with you is not the right, not
no.
okay.
Right, what the hell is wrong with you? WTF, it's like, one more, and then we'll stop. Allison.
I'm just gonna also just throw out that her book is super awesome. I've read it, and it's a really interesting new perspective on the science also. So it's definitely not just all about, if you just take a deep breath, everything will be better. It's really explaining all the brain function and everything. That brings a new perspective for me anyway.
Thank you. And it does talk about process,
yeah.
And some of the interpersonal skills, it lays those out. So it's really, and I want you to know this. I don't think I've told any group up here this. When I went to write this book, I literally wrote it for the residents of Humboldt County. I did, because when I first moved here 15 years ago, I just said, oh my God, the decisions that are being made here are going to affect us for generations. You can see it more in a rural area, right, than you can in a city, where I came from. So I wrote it for this book. I wrote for you. I literally did.
Yeah, I think I'm really glad that you wrote that, and I think it is really important, especially in our community where, with people with PTSD or people with ADHD or drug addiction, it's like their brains even more, they have prefrontal cortex. So if you can be aware when you're talking to somebody that they're struggling and be empathetic and have that awareness, or even in yourself, it can really de-escalate, instead of being reactive, when you can understand like, oh, they're feeling triggered right now, and how can I help them calm down, if you start to be aware of those things instead of just, personalizing and reacting all the time and escalating. I think it's super helpful.
Calm is as contagious as anger.
As anger, yeah, just slow your voice down.
Also.
Yeah, cool.
So,
Thank you.
I just want to add that there's a huge push in our schools with the mindfulness right now.
Oh, there is.
So you might be hearing the kids.
Oh, my goodness.
Just the other week, my colleague was saying she had her grandchildren over, a grandson and granddaughter, and they started to argue. The granddaughter pulled herself over to the side. She said, "What are you doing?" "I'm calming myself down before I
That's nice.
continue this conversation."
Oh,
So-
I love it.
Thank you very much for speaking today. That was absolutely fascinating. For speaking today, we're going to make a small donation in your name to the Wheelchair Foundation.
Oh,
So we
wonderful.
appreciate having you here.
Thank
And,
you.
yeah, thanks for listening. All right, rapid time. We're running up against the clock here.
And I just want to say while you're doing that if this is too much for you tonight, the cycle is playing at the Eureka.
That helps too.
202224.
There you go, no.
This is when dyslexia is not
What did we get? Pull the fiber out. All right, five.
Oh, sure. 202225. 202225.
Oh, that one too.
It's his birthday today.
Unbelievable. All right.
It's his birthday.
There it is. Here, $10. All right.
Happy birthday.
So thanks for being here today. I'll leave you with a vote for yourself if everyone else has already taken. You got it here. You get the weekend. See you next time.